folks. First, Colonel John Mills, who was the Director of Cyber Policy in the U.S. Pentagon, and he has been on multiple election monitoring teams. Colonel Mills will have some very important things to share with you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you. This is a very important topic. Elections are the foundation of constitutional republics around the world, and there has to be accountability, there has to be auditability, there has to be transparency in an election. And if there is not, then the whole concept of a constitutional republic begins to fall apart. We're dealing with an international election cartel that is essentially, this is not just affecting South Korea, it's affecting America, it's facing all countries around the world. And I've been involved in elections back in the 90s in Bosnia. It was much simpler. In 2006 in Iraq. It again much simpler, but it began to be affected by the U.S. Helping Americans Vote Act in 2002. Apparently, Americans were unable to vote before 2002, so we had to have a piece of legislation called the Helping Americans Vote Act. From that point onward, everything went downhill, and it's affected worldwide, the worldwide vote. But also, I've been a court-appointed election officer and given testimony in federal cases, election cases, but in dirty counties in Virginia. I've been appointed as an election officer because of dirty counties in Virginia. But the model is really Taiwan. I covered the January 2024 election in Taiwan. That is the model for a fair and clean election. Day of, one day, paper ballots, must show ID, everything is hand counted in front of everybody. And nothing enters any kind of electronic network until above the county level. Taiwan has 22 counties. So once it gets above the county level, that's when it gets into the computer networks. But everybody knows the count by that time. There's no debate. It's been publicly counted. Everybody knows what it is. What is going on when elections are overly complex, like South Korea, like America, that is a red flag for fraud. And I always just point to the Carter Center for Democracy, which used to be the gold standard for elections and election conduct. They seem to be uninterested when it doesn't go to a certain direction. But that is overly complex. There's no reason for this complex IT. No reason. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. I just point to Kill Chain. What happened right before the 2020 election? The movie Kill Chain, where a lot of leading Democrats said election machines are dangerous to the foundation of the United States. Interesting. Okay. This is a national security issue. It's a national security issue in South Korea. This was a stolen election. It's also in America. And there's a direct connection. I want to also bring up our good friend, the Filipinos, because in 2024, the Filipino Attorney General went to the previous Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and said, hey, you have an election machine company bribing Filipino officials to use that company. I'm not going to name the company name. That's an American company. That's an American CEO. That's a violation of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And Attorney General Merrick Garland, what are you going to do about it? Well, it put Merrick Garland in a very awkward situation. That same company, that CEO, is on trial right now. So we'll see the outcome, innocent till proven guilty. But that same company has hardware and software components in the South Korean election system. That same company. Isn't that interesting? But there's a direct tie-in here. So we thank our Filipino friends because they brought a huge case. Oh, and that same company, they had sued a number of media firms, and I know this personally, from the 2020 election. Almost all those cases for that election machine company went away. Once the Filipinos complained to Attorney General Merrick Garland, and charges were brought up against that CEO and the American election machine company. So direct ties to what happened in 2020, and as FBI Director Cash Patel has pointed out, we had the FBI essentially suppressing evidence of the fake IDs made under Chinese supervision in South Korea, in Hong Kong, in the UK, and flown from Korea to Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, this is international. This is a cartel. This is a cartel that is upsetting and throwing elections around the world. South Korea is merely the most recent case. I also want to point, we've identified Wang Huning, who's a very senior member of the Chinese Communist Party, who apparently was the quarterback and director of the whole Chinese influence campaign inside of South Korea. So you have a senior Chinese Communist Party official, essentially the quarterback. This is why South Korea had agreements with Communist China for police interchange. That's why you had this sudden unexplained presence of Chinese police in South Korea. In the world do we have Chinese police in South Korea for? It's crazy. You had all these government officials that apparently were actually overseeing the election in South Korea. Just unbelievable. South Korea, I would say, is America's closest ally and partner. Closer than any. Five Eyes, the UK, South Korea is America's closest friend and partner. And this is crazy what has gone on in South Korea. So this is, President Trump has an election executive order. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has given guidance on what they are going to look into on election fraud. This was even before the South Korean election. FBI Director Kash Patel has identified the fraud that was suppressed. So I think we now have the legal basis for both federal law enforcement and U.S. federal intelligence looking into these matters in South Korea, in addition to the treaty obligations on cyber that the ambassador mentioned here. This is very important. These are triggering events. So this election in South Korea is not over. It is the right of a citizen in a constitutional republic to ask questions. Anytime that is suppressed, that is wrong. And I will want to point out this absolutely bizarre National Election Commission, which apparently in South Korea, we don't even have an equivalent in America. The National Election Commission in South Korea cannot be questioned by anybody, not even the government of South Korea. Candidates sign a pledge they will never challenge anything that the National Election Commission does or says in South Korea. That is a super national body that cannot be challenged. I guess the National Election Commission is the government of South Korea. This is wrong. This is wrong. We don't know who these people are. South Koreans don't know who these people are. And yet, South Korean government can be investigated. South Korean government officials can be investigated. But nobody can challenge this body called the National Election Commission. It actually goes back a number of years, basically about 1960 in South Korea. A lot of questions, but you can never have a constitutional republic and have an entity like the National Election Commission. You no longer have a constitutional republic. Thank you. Please, we have a report. It's very good. Please, Section 2.3 lists a number of elements of what we consider to be the fraud, and also the first addendum in there, electionfraud.com. Very well documents what happened in South Korea. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Mills.